Mayo, La Raza Unida, MOC, Southwest Voter, lawsuits, MALDEF, but they were all together at that time. Uh, and there was the city was boiling over. So these were times that they were a catalyst. There was great change in the air, and one should always pinch oneself to be aware and alert when these big changes are occurring. It was truly a transformative time, and I think all of us, that is, Angel and Willie and Mario, we were too young to really realize how big it would be, and what kind of mark it would make. And there were, I mean, you look what Southwest Voter has done.
Well, you know, it was obvious that the gerrymandering that went on um, was set up in such a way that we could never win. We Latinos could never win, whether that was the Senate, the Congress, the House, um, the city. It was all stacked against us, and uh, we knew that in order for Latinos to win, you were going to have set up special districts. So for many years, I was able to, both on a volunteer basis and then through Mexican American Equal Rights, to help MALDEF with research. And there were a bunch of us: Gloria Cabrera, Jose Roy Boteo, George Corbel was leading the charge at the time at MALDEF, and then later Al. Charlie was expert witness in several of those cases. Had also been involved in some of the education cases, but Mexican American Equal Rights was mainly about the single member districts.
But we had filed a number of lawsuits following on White versus Register against a number of cities in Texas, against the city of Houston and the city of San Antonio and the city of Waco and a number of large school districts. And I was concerned that we weren't going to be able to put together good enough proof, and we had bad judges and in all those cases, and so I was very doubtful as to whether or not we were going to be successful. And so when I testified before the House and the Senate, what I did is I went into detail about all of these problems that we had, and that became then again the roadmap for what the Department of Justice does then once the Voting Rights Act is extended to Texas. And I wish I could say that I was smart enough to think that was going to happen, but it did happen, and the reason it happened was because these were areas that I thought we weren't going to win, and if we got the Voting Rights Act, we might be able to win.
My most, I guess, formative recollections of LULAC is not so much the organization as the people that make up the organization and the local individuals that would come to MALDEF and ask us, would tell us about their political situation and would ask us for representation. And from my perspective, they were the heroes of that movement, of the empowerment movement. And so they provided the lawyers and the legwork and the political operatives, but none of that would have been possible unless people in the local communities would step up to come to San Antonio, ask us for representation, point us in the right direction about where we can find evidence of the discrimination that they were complaining about. And then after the lawsuits are done, win, lose, or draws, they stayed in those communities. Whereas the lawyers and the experts and the support folks went back to their lives in San Antonio or Austin or wherever, right? And they had to stay there. So that's really where the courage of this time period really lies.
In 1974. At the time, I knew almost nothing about Latino civil rights. I knew almost no Spanish. I'd grown up, as I said, in this very racial, polarized world in Galveston, so it was all new to me. But that's how I got to work with MALDEF in 1974. Exciting time. MALDEF is still a new organization, growing rapidly, lots of exciting issues. Well, from MALDEF, I learned a lot of things. One of the important lessons I learned that a lot of people still don't know is the diversity within the Latino community. The other thing I learned was the tremendous history of discrimination against Mexican Americans in Texas. I mean, my first cases involved the history of discrimination. So I studied it, and I talked to people who had suffered it, and all that I've added together to build up my knowledge of the area. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to claim too much for it, but when people do talk about the Voting Rights Act in general, both in the South and elsewhere in the country, they use this metaphor of the keys to the kingdom. And when you open the gates to everybody participating, it means that everybody has to be dealt with and everybody can apply pressure. And you can't just get away with living in a hermetically sealed, tiny little electorate where they're all people who basically agree with your values. You have to begin to take other people into account. So I think that the story of the rise, the insurgency of the Latino community in this country is a very complicated one.
Well, historians argue that the Voting Rights Act is the most effective civil rights legislation ever enacted. And therefore, from that perspective, bringing the act to our community was extremely important. One, it signified to me, I wanted to make our community more visible nationally. Number two, it allowed MALDEF to become a national organization. Before that, it was strictly regional. And so when I got involved, MALDEF and myself got involved with the VRA, all of a sudden the New York Times, Washington Post, the Houston Chronicle, San Antonio, all these major papers were reporting on it and giving MALDEF a lot of play. So it made the organization much better known.